Okay, we're back. I told you this one was coming, so it's time to talk about the Spyderco Janisong. Hey, what's up? I'm Ken. This is kenfuTV, and this time you're watching Things Ken Likes. Normally I do videos on the martial arts every week, philosophy, training, technique, that sort of thing, but every now and again I review some stuff, and I talk about things that I have an interest in. A lot of times, that's knives. So we're going to do a kenfuReview on the Spyderco Janisong. This little number is really interesting because it's not easy to get a hold of for those of us that live in the United States. This is technically a balisong. It's a butterfly knife. You can see it's got, and I'll get into its construction in a minute. As a butterfly knife, there are restrictions on import into the US. So if the knife, like this one is built in Taiwan, it's not allowed to be imported into the US under that import law. So it's not easy to get a hold of. They don't make them anymore. They've been discontinued. You can still get them. In fact, quite a lot of people have picked them up. They're new in box. They're not even really opened or opened at all. The same case with this one. Different ways of getting a hold of them. You can sometimes find them through eBay, things like that. People are allowed to resell them to each other, that sort of thing. It's just that whole getting them to the US part. Because of that, this review is coming in way later than I would have liked, just because I've wanted to try this knife for a long time. Very interested in its creator, Michael Janich. He's designed a number of knives. He runs Martial Blade Concepts. That's his martial system that he uses that's very blade based. He's also just played a big role in the knife community, especially when it comes to tactical folders and knives that open one-handed. And that's important, that piece, because that was the thing that drew his passion towards designing the knives that he has. He wanted knives that you could open with one hand. You think back, right now it's very, very commonplace, but when you think back, knives were a two-handed open, right? They might have had a nail nick, they might have had different things, either carried a fixed blade, or you'd have to get both hands out and open your knife, your little pocket knife. It carried typically in your pocket. Tactical folders became more of a thing when you had a one-handed open that you could actually clip to your pocket. It wasn't buried in the bottom of your pocket. It became tactically more accessible. Now we've got a lot of different ideas of what we think a tactical folder is. And that's okay. That's a natural progression of things. But you can't look at that without spending time at looking at people like Michael Janich, Ernest Emerson, and others. Those people are a big part of why we have the things we have and the designs that exist today. Now, I've talked about Michael Janich's knives before. This one in particular, the Spyderco Yojimbo 2. This knife, and I'll link it up here, this is one that I've done a review on here recently. A lot of you have probably seen it, and in that video I actually mentioned this knife. So kind of a fun crossover, you can now see both videos. I really like this design. I'll save my feelings later on that. You go watch that video to know more about this one. Now when it comes to one-handed folders, Michael Janich has a particular method of opening that he uses. I don't think it's particular to him, but it's a method that he uses a lot that you'll see in a lot of his knife designs, how he manipulates his knives in Martial Blade Concepts. And that is the inertia open, where you hold the knife, you're not flicking with a thumb, you're not doing the Spidey flick, you're not using these pocket wave features, this one being the 5x5 Combat Solutions pickpocket feature. You're not doing that. Instead, you're pivoting the knife around the pivot, overcoming that inertia and creating momentum to pop the knife open. Works very well, and you don't have to rely on a particular mechanism. Something that he wanted to see in his designs is he had an active interest in single-handed opening knives. He's done his own prototyping, he's built knives. When you look at kind of the story of some of these, some of his interest even came into like the switchblades, like the folding switchblades, which he couldn't get a hold of. So he pulled apart one of his knives and got a switchblade comb and cobbled those together. So he made a switchblade knife that worked briefly, but it was functional. He was able to make it, and it did what it did. He continued to learn and build his passion for those things. Now he's got a varied martial arts background, including the Filipino martial arts, which are known in their history and their culture for the balisong, or the butterfly knife. Quick shout out to the shirt, balisong. Go look at the balisong project. That's where you can see and support the project, where they're doing a documentary on the balisong, which is going to be really, really cool, and I want to see that come to fruition. So support that project, and we'll see it happen. So the butterfly knife, to talk about the butterfly knife, or the balisong, I need to talk about the actual design. So here's just a standard. This is a Benchmade Model 67. They've made a number of them over the years. This is one that has kind of a very classic and recognizable design. Difference is you've got this release down here, this latch that keeps these handles closed. One of the basic design principles of the balisong. Balisong itself, the word meaning broken horn, is that it has two handles that split apart, rotate around each other, and produce a blade. So if you release the latch, this opens up and here is your blade. Always two handles. You've got your safe handle, the one that you can grab and the blade will not cut you unless it's double-sided. There are those out there. Or it touches the other handle, the bite handle or the latch handle. And now that side is the bite handle because it can cut you, right? So if you're on this side, now you've got the edge towards your hand. So the latch handle people try to stay away from. This is a knife that I used to see in your like Asian gift stores. I didn't think anything of them. I thought they were silly. I didn't understand it. And that was just it. I didn't understand it. Like Janich, I also train Filipino martial arts, and as part of that, I spent time diving into that culture and I wanted to understand, and so I picked up one from the Philippines that I carried for a while. It was huge, it was heavy, it was brass, it had a water buffalo horn in the handle, very traditional. It was way too big. It was about this long. When it was open, the handles, it was about like that. It was really, really big. I've since owned a lot of these, but what I found by picking these up and carrying them is that I actually really like the design. It's a very sturdy design when it's closed. There's no way that this will open up on you. It can't, because you're literally keeping it closed. There's a lot of different ways to open this knife, and when you want to open it, you just swing that out. The handles move out of the way, and then here you are. Now, with this, you'll see that the design as these two handles move around. This is what they refer to as a Zen pin construction, meaning it's got this kind of nipple here and these two pins in the handles that pinch that and keep it from going anywhere. So you'll see this motion here, and that locks in place. So right now you see this doesn't drop. On this side, it is able to drop. So it's able to close on itself. You're never gonna have this opening in your pocket. I can't say never. I can't say never. Standard construction was very often pinned, and you'd have a pin up high and a pin down low. But what happens is when that clamps down, when you have this in your hand and you squeeze tight, this blade is not gonna come closed on your hand, because even if that pin were to break, it at best can do this, right? It's got, the handles have to actually move all the way around. This pivot pin here would have to actually all the way come around for that to close. You can see that depending on its motion, that's its option. So it can't close on you. All right, so that's a pretty great feature. Also, pound for pound, when it goes total length, you can see that your blade length to handle length, that ratio is specifically more balanced in a balisong. All of your folders, so they have room for the folding pieces, they have room to keep that blade out of harm's way for you. That costs in blade length. These, once they're open, they have the ability to have that blade go all the way up, and I've had some that go even closer to that handle, and that makes them one of the longest folding knives when it comes to a blade to handle ratio. So while this, you can say, why do I need a knife that big? It also means that I can have a smaller one with smaller handles and still have fairly decent overall size once it's open. A good case in point is this little guy. So this little guy, another Benchmade, when it's closed, it's very small, barely expands past my hand. So very small, easy to pocket, but then when it's open, it's fairly long. Let's bringing this one back. Once it's open, they're about that same distance. So that's what we've got. We've got two handles, we've got a blade, we've got a mechanism that's keeping them from closing once it's open, rotates around a center point. So one of the things that Janich wanted to tackle was the idea of the bite handle, and the fact that if you work with a butterfly knife, if you work with a balisong, you're gonna cut yourself. Especially as you're new, you know, a lot of the guys that flip them, things like that, they'll tape them for a while until they get more comfortable. They'll use trainers. Now there's a lot more trainers available than there ever used to be. And so the trainers are just blunted so that you can work that without that fear of getting cut. So he wanted to produce one that could have all the functionality of a balisong, not from a flipping perspective, not from the recreation of it, but from a useful EDC/tactical self-defense purpose knife, but also not have it be something that would cut you if you didn't handle it properly. So let's look at that design. You've already seen it. It doesn't have just one handle, it's got two, and inside that is the blade. So as this opens up and spins around, I've got my safe handle on the outside. It's always on the outside. It's always the one that my hand will be on. And then meanwhile, as this comes around, your bite handle, you're not grabbing this handle, so that blade can't come into contact with you. It spins through, it locks down closed, and now I've got that same tension for me to work through that. And I'll do another video on the disassembly so you can see how this works, what the design is of why this functions the way that it does. But now I'm using my actual hand holding this closed from keeping this from deploying back. I can put leverage on that and what have you. The locking mechanism also can be re-engaged, and now that isn't going anywhere. So all the time when you're moving this knife, you're holding onto the safe handle. Very cool, very interesting design. Now that's not to say that that's how that always is. Honestly, when you look at Filipino work, you see a lot of these secondary hand motions where this comes in place and gets here. Well, sometimes that means that you're going to come through and you're going to grab hold of this. Changing hands and working both hands and things like that, using redirection and energy momentum from the alive hand is part of that Filipino methodology. There are hand switches that you'll do with the butterfly knife where this comes around and you do come in contact with this handle and then you work this closed and around. Now there's different ways of managing that. One of those ways is just managing this momentum, whereas it comes through, you redirect and pull that away before the blade makes contact with the hand. The other way is, in this case with this knife, is you flip it all the way around and it goes, but you notice the handle comes with it. And so now the blade is not touching my hand, even though I'm holding the bite handle. Now, this is not foolproof. If you're not good at this, you're producing an opportunity where this could take place. But it's been reduced. On a standard balisong, when you're holding that bite handle when this comes around, there is nothing between you and it. That handle only goes halfway. It can't protect you from the edge. This one is different. I grab that and that comes through. The whole handle comes through, and now that's partially protected. Not something I advise, and not particularly what it was designed for, though if you watch videos of him, and I'll link some of him working with it, you'll see him do that, and that's just because of the way that it is still designed to do that well if you're good at that motion. But ideally, you're constantly touching the safe handle. You're working, and you've got this in your hand, and you're not able to cut yourself. Take some of the danger out of the balisong, while still keeping it a functional tool and a functional weapon. You know, some of you are going to look at this and go, well, why? What was the point of that? Why did we do that? And truthfully, you're probably not the person this knife was designed for if that's how you're looking at it. A lot of your single-handed openings and closings are going to continue to work the way you're used to. The idea of, for example, the double rollout, where this comes out again, and back, it's kind of a standard opening. Very feasible, very possible. It's very natural with this knife. It's blocky. This handle is squared off. I don't find that to be a very smooth way to do it, but it works. Now this one, which happens to be one of my favorites, this just kind of flick motion that just moves it into your hand, open and closed. It's one of the fastest ways to open it. Definitely works, and I really like it. Though when you do that, it's going to open edge side up. So you have to know that, and you can reverse it, you can flip it through, but that's just the way because of this handle design. To do that with edge side down with a standard balisong, you do it with the bite handle. You can't selectively choose the bite handle here when it's closed, so it's just not an option. An opening I find to be one of the more functional ones for this particular knife is this motion here, this kind of finger pinching motion. So as this comes out, wrap your fingers through, this swings over, the hand rolls over, and then you come back in like this. So you're not trying to do this flip. So as I do that, I'm actually rolling the knife in my hand rather than having to try to flip it over for a double rollout. So we come here and back. It's probably the way that I open it the most with this particular design, but it does work in different ways, including your reverse grip options, right? So you have your different types of opens to get you in a reverse grip. You also have things like your up and down, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, kind of some basic movements. So let's talk about the knife itself. The knife itself, made by Spyderco, produced in Taiwan. You've got G10 handle scales and an S30V blade. The blade itself is just over 3¼ inches. The total length is just under 8¼ inches. The blade has a flat grind and a hard cornered spine, and your typical Spidey hole, that's brand identification, right? This is branding more so than, it's not a functional thing on this knife. It's just a piece of the way that they do their branding. Closed, this is just under 5½ inches. The weight being about 5½ ounces. Now you notice thickness is a problem with this one. It's got some girth to it. That's just part of the design. When you're stacking handles together, multiple layers, it's going to be that way. With it being more narrow though, it still has a way of kind of disappearing in the pocket because it's not a lot of width. The pocket clip itself is a deep carry pocket clip, so when it slides into the pocket, it slides all the way deep, can kind of tuck all the way. I think that's great. They did put 4 different positions that you can move that pocket clip to, so you've got right side and left side, tip up and tip down, all of those options available, which is great. Now, that said, you notice we don't have a latch on the bottom. The latch is right under your thumb, which I think is great. When you pull the knife, it's right under here. You're able to get to it. Whereas with the balisong, you've got all these different ways where you're clipping it across your body, clipping it across your pants, you're snagging it on the way through. Different ways of disengaging that latch. Some of them you squeeze and the latch becomes released. This is right under your thumb, you drop it down and you're good to go. So now we go back to those pocket clips. That switch is on both sides. So you can actually, when you're doing that, you're deploying it finger and thumb, or you can do it with just your thumb or do it with just your finger. Just your finger is a lot more difficult, but just your thumb works. Both works best. It's actually got a ball bearing detent for movement. So now you see the problem with the four direction pocket clip. If you move the clip into a tip down carry, you're covering up at least one side of this. Not the end of the world, just something to know about. I personally like a tip up carry with the pocket clip sitting on the side where when that is underneath my fingers, the handle drops freely. So as soon as I draw that out, this has the ability to be presented right away. That's my personal preference. You could move this wherever you want. Honestly, one of the things that I'm considering doing is removing the clip entirely, leaving the lock disengaged, and actually building some form-fit kydex where you can draw straight out of that. So the kydex is keeping the blade in place, but now the lock is permanently disengaged, the clip's out of the place, you pull it out and you go. Experiment with that, I'll see what that looks like. It ought to be kind of interesting, at least from the locking standpoint. The clip could go away or stay. You could keep it to know what side things are on. Otherwise, it's a symmetrical knife. But the main thing is the lock, right? You draw it, you work the lock and you go. It's an extra step. And if you are carrying it from a tactical standpoint, that step takes time and it's covered, right? So you got to pull it out, do that, and do this. It already takes time to open this. It's a very fast opening knife, but it's not the fastest. Something like that pickpocket or the Emerson Wave, those things happen so quickly. It's almost automatic. So instead, the idea of having this in and I keep kind of gesturing here because I think of you could even do a neck carry or something like that, but you could have a belt carry, you could scout carry, however you want to do it, but have that on your kit somewhere, just in a kydex, deploy that, and then you don't have to worry about the lock mechanism at all. We'll see. If I do it, I'll try to put together a video and show you kind of how it works out. So in this design, you've got the safe handle, the bite handle, and the blade. In the safe handle, you've got these extra spacers. They're just providing weight to add that counterbalance, because without it, you don't have the ability to swing this easily. There's a lot of structure, to be honest. I've pulled this apart, I've worked it all together, and this probably has the most parts I've seen in a folding knife, period. Truly on the way down, and like I said, I'll do a disassembly, but you've got your knife scale, you've got the liner, the inner liner that's managing the actual locking mechanism, then you've got a steel liner, then you've got a washer. Past that washer, you've got the safe handles liner. You've got these posts, you've got then a washer, then you've got the blade, then it reverses. Now you've got the washer, the bite handle, the washer, the liner of the safe handle, the liner that manages the locking mechanism, then the outer scale of the safe handle. Of course, there's additional pieces too, right? So there's actually pieces that are managing the mechanism of movement. Post back here for support and stability. You've got the pocket clip itself. You've got your pivot, obviously pivot screws and pivot post. And then you also have the switch. The switch itself is in multiple pieces. You've got the actual plastic part of the switch. You've got the ball bearing, and then you have a spring maintaining that ball bearing and helping it move back and forth. So altogether, a ton of pieces. It's worth knowing that, and the disassembly video will hopefully help you, because if you own one of these, if you come up with one of these, there's a card in the box that says, do not return this to a US factory. And you're certainly not going to send it out to Taiwan to have repaired, because then they can't send it back to you. So you're going to have to do your own maintenance. Not the end of the world, but there you go. Another thing worth talking about, this is my experience with this, is that if this comes out, because there's no support through here, this has flex to it. With that flex, I can move this around as much as I want, and this isn't going anywhere. That flex binds these pieces here. I honestly, with lube and adjustment, I have not found a way to get this thing to move as smoothly as I would like to see it, and certainly not as smoothly as I've seen videos of Janich himself working on the old Blackhawk version, which there was a Blackhawk version before the Spyderco version. That flex does a lot. If you are working on this and you got this in your hand and you're wanting to manipulate it, you might have tension in your fist to hold it, right? Especially under stress and duress. So when you do that, now suddenly it's not going, it's not moving. That changes things. So that's worth knowing. There's gonna be a lot of people that'll look at this and go, this is Certainly not for me. I don't even understand why it exists. I think it's very cool. I think it's an interesting piece. It's certainly a collectible piece, especially with the scarcity of being able to come up with one in the US. All in all, it's a really interesting knife. I don't find it to be the most attractive. It's not what I look for in a knife as far as aesthetics go, but it's a very interesting knife. It's very comfortable to carry, and it does open and move really well. I'm still going to work on tuning it to see if I can determine a way to have it function better than it does for me right now. And all in all, it's a solid user. You could use this. That S30V steel is a durable steel that holds a good edge. You might have to put a little more effort into sharpening or use a good sharpening system to make that easier on you. But once you have a good edge on it, it tends to retain it well. That flat grind gives it a lot of practical uses day to day, even all the way down to food prep. If you wanted to, you've got some different options there because of that. Maybe it just becomes your letter opener on your desk. Certainly has a fidget factor, so you could make this your fidget toy / letter opener / I don't know, something else. Depends on you, depends on what you want. Depends on what you like. I like the balisong. To me, this isn't a replacement of the balisong. I know for him, this was a design that took all of his favorite features and put them into a new knife, a new concept, something that we had not seen before, which is hard to do. So by having done that at all is already great. He revolutionized the industry in a couple different ways by some of the things that he tried to push forward. And I think that's really great. All in all, I'd prefer a standard balisong just because maybe I'm more comfortable with them. I also like the way they look a little bit better, but it's still a great knife. If you can get a hold of one, they're going to be priced kind of based on what you want to spend to get a hold of one, because it's not just walk down to your store and pick one up. But that's it. That's the Spyderco Janisong. Do you own one of these? If you do, tell me about it in the comments. Let me know why you like it. Let me know why you bought one. Do you carry it? Tell me that. Otherwise, tell me what you think of this. Just in general, you've watched this video. What are your thoughts on this knife? And would you carry it? Would you buy it? Especially, what would you spend on it? That said, this is kenfuTV. This was a Kenfu review of the Spyderco Janisong. If you like this video, hit that like button. If you like videos like this and the other kinds of videos that I do, the martial content, hit that subscribe right here. I'll throw up some other videos like this over here, then maybe some other videos that you might like down here. But that's it for now. Catch you in the next one.